Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Never Consistent podcast. The Practice of Love podcast with Ashley Torrent and me, Lair and Torrent. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and Ash is also a practicing therapist. We are here. What are we talking about today? What's the topic today? You had a question from...
Oh, I did have a question, but I also love that I'm not a licensed therapist, and I think that's a whole nother interesting story that we won't cover today, but one day we'll cover about my rebellious
She's practicing without a license, folks. So is everybody out there now. It's
ordained,
wild,
I'm safe.
It's the Wild West out there. I honestly think that they should charge more. It should make it harder for people to get a microphone. Right? There's just too many podcasts, too many people who think they should be speaking. But
I am ordained. I'm safe.
She is ordained. You can worship the way you like.
But that would be fun to talk about our different paths. Yes, let's save that. I'm going to write that down.
No, because all you're going to do is talk about how witchy and soulful yours is and how uptight and shitty mine is.
Well, let's save that for the podcast and see what happens. Okay, right. Today. I had a question from someone I know. They wanted us to consider this for a future topic. So here we are in the present. The topic is to talk about compromise, conciliation, and partnership without abandoning or losing yourself and continuing to grow individually. The person said sometimes it feels a lot, especially when they work so hard to maintain their independence. And they recognize that sometimes independence can be fraught with survival and distrust. But I've had this question come up a couple of times.
So it's how to keep the individual alive while being consumed by your all-consuming partnership, relationship. Is that what this is?
I think a lot of people wonder, like, what does compromise look like in a partnership? How do I maintain my individuality but still be in partnership? I think it's a wonky place for people sometimes. I personally feel like there's a place where, the relationship is new and you're in this cocoon and you're maybe spending a lot of time together and maybe staying at the other's house and like your routine is all off, and there comes this pivotal moment where you kind of get back to like regular life, or you've got to bring more of like your old hobbies or interests into it. Like there needs to be a little more independence. I think this naturally is a time, but it makes people feel nervous and anxious because I think as the individual, people worry that, oh, if I start, and I don't know if this is what this person was thinking of. I think this stage could last a year, a couple of years, where they want to have a little time to themselves. They want to go back to their interests. They need just a little more spaciousness to come back to their own energy, but they're afraid if they say it, the other person's going to misinterpret it as the relationship is changing. It might trigger some abandonment. The person might have feelings about it. So I see it as an opportunity to deepen intimacy, emotional intimacy.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. But what are your thoughts and feelings?
Well, first of all, I just want to make sure that we're clear. So what we're talking about is an individuation period that sprouts from this place of, there's often anxiety in the beginning of a relationship. We don't necessarily call it that, but there is this anxious attachment scenario that we're all sort of playing into. Everything's new, the dopamine's flying, but we're rushing to some sort of intimacy or some sort of familiarity and trying to make those connections. And then at some point we kind of recognize that those connections have been made and we're feeling safe enough that we can individuate. And typically this happens for one person before it happens for another. And that need to individuate, quite natural and normal, then causes an anxious attachment uproar in the other. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think this perhaps is what your client's talking about, or person.
It might be, but let's go with it. And I also think sometimes it creates an uproar. And if the person wants to individuate, but they're scared they won't be perceived as attentive or as caretaking or as loving, like they might have an identity of being a caretaker. I'm thinking of someone I know in particular, who I've worked with, that the fear of asking for time for themselves might be interpreted as, oh, you're not participating in this as much as I thought you were. It like changes the perception of them.
Well, it sounds like that's perceived as an abandonment.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. So there can be the partner who wants the change can be triggered because they're afraid of how they're perceived. And then the partner on the other end can be triggered because all of a sudden the energy or the consistency or the dynamic between two people is changing.
Right. And so if we're looking at it from a parts perspective, maybe a parts narrative perspective, right? So this partner decides to individuate. What comes up in me if I'm the one who is noticing this, the chasm first, if we can call it that. There's this split or this natural need to kind of begin to spend more time doing the things that make you, your old hobbies, hanging out with, look how that old trope of like, as soon as this person gets a boyfriend or a girlfriend, they no longer have any friends. And so maybe they're, rekindling those old friendships and going back there. And so what does it bring up in the person who, or who does it bring up in the person who is sort of feeling this, that oh, you're changing the rules, you're individuating, and I'm feeling perhaps some anxiety, perhaps some abandonment. And so it becomes, I think, a real imperative, working from the frame that you and I created, the practice of love, 5 practices, to take responsibility for and to look at who in me shows up, right? And this becomes particularly true for people who have abandonment issues or abandonment wounds. If they have a core wound in safety, I don't matter, I'm not enough, that certainly will exacerbate and sort of rub those raw spots and cause us to come up in our that younger part of us. And then who comes with the younger wounded part, that protective side of self, right? And however we do that. And so we might become angry and frustrated and try to close the gap that way, or we may become remote. I see this one a lot too, where it's like, oh, really? Okay, fine. You want to play that game? Then I'll play that game. Let's do that. Let's play the game, right? And so I'm gonna ice you the way I feel like you're icing me. And it becomes a really important time for us to stop, push, pause, take that breath, and notice who in me is coming up around this. Is this actually an abandonment? Or is this just a natural need for this person to individuate? We've been going along, doing this thing. And from that perspective and from that lens of the wounded child part or the protective side of self, I can't see the markers in the relationship that would denote safety, that would denote that I actually matter to this person,
right?
That I'm actually enough, that they could go and come back quite naturally, and sort of re-own their old version of themselves, and that actually our relationship is safe.
I agree. I feel like people become so reactive when they feel a shift in the energy of their relationship or the dynamic. And I remember doing this too early on because like trust hadn't been built to the degree.
With me?
I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure there were some like, if there was a change, just because I'd grown up in such instability. I mean, I was on like riding my mother's emotional roller coaster. So I think initially, having said that, I think you and I had really deep conversations early on. So I don't feel like I was so reactive. I might have had a reaction internally, but I would stop and I would go, okay, well, we talked early on about like, who is this person, the consistency, the constancy that they're showing me, those kinds of things. We talked about those conversations. So I think while my body might have reacted or my inner child might have gotten triggered, I feel like because of the conversations we'd had, I'd learned to be able to like go, okay, what's really going on here? And like recognize I don't need to react outward to you. I can like kind of watch what's happening within me
and regulate yourself.
Right. But I feel like, and I think it's important that people listening, like ask yourself, like when you're triggered, what kind of games are you playing with your partner? Like I'm like, whoa,
like what you see, you see in people, clients.
Yeah. They go young, high school, little kid, icing each other out. I'm going to punish you energetically, silent treatment, and I'm just like, it breaks. What'd you say?
Withholding sex,
withholding affection, withholding anything. It's heartbreaking to watch how quickly we go to those younger places, but we have such a responsibility to catch them. And I have a lot of people say to me, but that's so hard. and we've talked about this, we can't afford not to. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we can't afford not to be mindful. We can't afford not to track what's going on. What are our thoughts and feelings? How are we doing in this moment? Because we just become reactive, right? We're just like acting all over each other.
Well, and to your point, I think we so quickly want to place that blame and say, well, and it's so antithetical to, and this is the thing that all the practices point at, right? It points back to self. In the work that I do, from that practice of love perspective, from the 5 practices, none of those practices point the finger towards that other person. They bring it back to the only source of power that we really have within a relationship, and is how are you showing up? What can you take responsibility for, to your point?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I can notice my want or need to act from that younger self, or act from that protective side of self. But can I do what you did? And this is before I think we had any training at all. So hats off to you.
Well, I mean, you would remember if I did or not. I feel like I did.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if we did that stuff. I was
I
trying
don't
to
know.
remember.
I feel like the things that we got in fights about were usually when we're drinking, and it wasn't about this. Some made up shit.
Some stupid shit.
Like, my brain would just go look for something to pick on.
There it is.
Oh, that tequila. Well,
Yeah. I was like, did I ever do that? And so that brings us the question, like, are we codependent?
no, but I mean, you would even say, like, I remember you saying you left town, you went on a guy's trip, and I was fine. I'm good alone. And I remember you being like, do you miss me? And I'm like, yeah, but
do you
you're
even
like,
miss me at all?
I was like, yeah, but you're gone and you're going to be back. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, but I remember it kind of triggering you, because I was just like, well, yeah, I miss you.
I left. But wait, when was that?
You went to Vegas with Mark.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that was like a year or 2 into our relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
but the thing is, I felt safe with you.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt safe with you.
Yeah.
Like, and also I'm really good at being alone. So like, you go, and I remember taking the dog to the dog park and just doing my thing, and you were the one that was like, you don't miss me.
You don't miss me at all.
I'm like, I do, but
Right. So, well, so you were okay enough with even that short, but that's often when it comes up too, right? Like, oh, you're going on a friend's trip, or you have a client who, but I have clients whose partners travel a bit, and travel can often bring that up, that sense of like, oh, well, wait, are you still feel the same way about me, even though you're going off doing this really cool thing? And so I think we see iterations of this that kind of creep up in people, but especially around in the beginning of a relationship, more towards the beginning of a relationship. But look, I guess it can creep in later on as well, especially if a new dynamic, a new job. That's often where I'll hear about it too. Is the so and so has a new job, and they're talking about all these new people, and so that there's that fresh upspring of like insecurity around. Are you going to choose somebody else? Or are you going to think someone else is more interesting in me, cuter than me, sexier than me, all that stuff?
Right. Well, I was thinking about, I had huge, trust issues, meaning just in life, because of the people I grew up with. And I was thinking about, we would talk about when we were triggered. Like, we would talk about, like, if you were like, you don't miss me, or you had feelings about it, we were talking. And this is why conversations and building a friendship and a connection with your partner is so important. I noticed that people are resistant to talking about these things. What does this mean about me? And I learned to say to you, hey, just so you know, you haven't done anything, but I'm triggered because it's my stuff. And we could talk about it. Right. And sometimes it wasn't pretty. Sometimes I was clumsy. Sometimes it wasn't good, but I think the thing that's helped us so much is we've talked about these stages in relationship. Would you agree?
I would. And I would say that the thing that we've gotten really good at is conversation. And this is the thing that I'm constantly having to remind couples and individuals who are in a couple that, you almost can't you almost can't communicate enough. And I know sometimes people are like, well, really, I mean, what else are we going to, as I make that joke, like our kids are like, what could you guys possibly still have to talk about? And I don't like going through a day without having a fairly in-depth conversation with you. And I think we've become very adept at conversation in general, but being able to go to depth. And what I notice in my clients often is there's a fear around communication because we don't communicate a lot. And or if we do, it's not good. And we're so out of practice and out of our depth when feelings come into it that I'm pretty sure it's going to go sideways. And so I think the cure to so much of this and so many things in relationships is getting really good at communication and making time for that.
And noticing. Sorry, go ahead. No,
go ahead.
I was going to say, noticing like when is a good time. You don't have those conversations when you're both scared and pissed off. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to have a conversation with you if you're like in a bad mood and you're struggling. I might wait till you're since this morning.
Yeah. What are you talking about? You're lying right now. You're like, I'm fucking talking about it.
No, I mean, just like, I know this is not the right time to bring this up. I'm going to wait until there's a right time. And I'm the same way. Like, you know, and
I don't know if I agree with that though. Like, I mean, I get it. Like in theory, I get it. So here's what I would say to that. Because I have clients who will say, yeah, I'm going to talk. I'll encourage them to have this conversation, a difficult conversation with their partners. And so they'll come back and they'll say, I'll say, did you talk to them about that thing? And they'll say, you know, I didn't. It was really not a good week. Get a good weekend.
Oh, there's never a good time. I've heard that. Yeah.
But then they'll come back and they'll say, how about this week? Did you bring it up? And they'll say, well, it was going so great. I didn't want to fuck it up.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And so for me, because what I think you're really good at is couching, right? Like you'll say, hey, I recognize this might not be the best time. And there's something we really need to talk about, or there's something I think we should really discuss. We don't have to do it now, and we always do. And it's, for me, it's just that naming of like, okay, this might not be the most opportune moment, but that doesn't just absolutely piques my curiosity. Then I have to know what it is
you always have to know. I was just thinking of this morning, you were having a difficult morning.
I know what you're talking about.
I was like, not now, but a couple hours later, we talked about it.
Yeah.
And you were in a place to receive it. And this is like a topic for another time, but I mean, this is what we're talking about now. So, I mean, a lot of times I think a lot of people will say there's no good time, but you have to find a time because the avoidance of it is worse. Now, if your partner's like at the bottom of an emotional pit, you might want to wait till they come up a little higher. That's what I'm saying.
That's even a time to say, like, listen, I know this is probably not the best time. You're on the trip or you're not doing well, or you're at the bottom of an emotional pit, but we should talk about this.
Yeah. And no, you're right.
Circling back to the thing that we started this off with, which is, you know, that individuation, that chasm, that gap gets closed very, very quickly just by being able to talk about it in a clear, concise, compassionate. As I've said this before, couples need to be able to say hard things compassionately.
Right? Well, when either of us soften and we're like, hey, I see you're struggling, or I know this may not be, you know, I'd like to say this to you. Can you like hear me out? You know, when you do like say that, then it is helpful. Like it's like a way of like de-escalating and regulating the situation.
Well, it's a call to, and this is the, you know, when I'm teaching couples how to communicate better, it's like, okay, so one of the things I'll ask is, so we've planned a difficult conversation. The first question is, who's here? Right. And so if you're going to have a conversation about this, in this particular case, this sense of like, I feel you leaving, or you're going away, or I feel like you're individuating and it's scaring me. The thing no one does, and part of the reason why we have jobs, is that people just start having conversation from that wounded self or from that protective side of self, two parts of self that are designed to create distance. Right. Let me say that again. Two parts of self that are designed to create distance, yet we're trying to close that gap. And so what we have to do is first foremost is name for ourselves, who's here? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up to this conversation? How do I want this conversation to go? And are these the parts of me that are good at that thing? Probably not. Mm-hmm. And so the first order of responsibility, besides knowing what part of me is here for this conversation, is to say, okay, where's the wise self? Where's my most mature self? Where's the part of me that can take responsibility, can be compassionate to my partner's experience? Because you see them moving away. They start making an argument for, I need more time with my friends, and I need those protective sides, that wounded kid in you, that abandoned child in you, if that's your issue. There's no seeing that as anything other than some version of abandonment. Mm-hmm. You can't see it any other way. That's the lens you're looking at this through. And so adopting that new lens, finding that different aspect of self, the adult self that can kind of say, I actually do understand and see that from this perspective. I can understand why you would need that. I can tell you that for parts of me, it's really hard because you've gotten to it first. And so there are parts of me, because of my experience, that feel abandoned. Can we talk about that? Instead, what we have is people fighting on the surface about this thing that they're never going to get any traction in, because they're in parts of self that can never take responsibility and aren't designed to make that connection.
Right.
No. Do you think we answered the question?
I think we did. I'd like to go a little farther to say, so you have the conversation about individuating if you feel like it's causing some disruption, but also how important it is to support, authentically, if you need to work on this. But I love when you take time for yourself. I love when you nurture the aspects of you that are self-care. I love it. And I know you love that in me. And I'm someone that I need to come back to my own energy, because I'm just in other people's energy all the time. And then I'm an introvert, so I need to come back to my own energy. And you really celebrate and encourage that. And I love that about us, that it's, there's a lot we do together and we enjoy together. And then also I feel like I really like it when you take care of yourself.
I have a confession to make.
Yes.
On this topic, I have to admit, you were going through, not too long ago, you were going through a lot. And one of the ways you regulated yourself was you would go to the horses, and you would go to the horses a lot. Mm-hmm. And there were times where I felt like you were choosing the horses over me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I was really doing is choosing myself.
Choosing yourself. Yeah.
And we had a conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
We did.
About how you're mean.
I went through a period where I was grieving, and I was trying to heal my relationship to life and to myself. And the horses were like a catalyst for that. And I was going 3 days a week for a couple hours, and it was huge for me. And I remember once we had the conversation, it seemed to change, right?
It did.
Because there was a younger part of you, or some part of you, that was coming up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's the fight that tends to happen, I think, within people. You have some sense of this is up with them. Like for me, this is up for me. I feel some sense of abandonment that I know I shouldn't feel. So I'm not going to talk about it, but it's going to seep out the sides.
Oh, it did.
Right.
Spilled all over the kitchen.
So I'm going to be a little shitty from time to time, but I'm not going to take any responsibility for it. No. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's how that plays out. Mm-hmm. And, you're talking about someone who's supposed to be good at this. But it did, that's because I was compartmentalized in that part of myself, that aspect, that younger version of myself. And then we start weaving, and this is another aspect, another layer of it. We start weaving a narrative. Mm. Right? We start weaving an internal narrative that we don't say out loud. And if we did, if the light of day ever hits that narrative, then we go, well, I don't really believe that. I'm like, yeah, you do. You actually do. You buy into it. The thoughts become feelings. The feelings become thoughts. And as I always like to say, Tolle said it best, the brain tells a story, your body believes it. And so you're like, oh, going to the horses again, huh? Right. Well, I guess I'm good. I guess we don't need to touch base and see how, right? And so, but some part of you knows it's a kind of a shitty narrative, or it's not really one that's it's not mature. It's probably not true. but you keep that inside. And this again goes back to, we need to say things out loud, not everything, but we need to say some things out loud. We need to be able to talk and have conversations where I can say, hey, I have to be honest, I am feeling a little abandoned. And so in this particular case, both get to be true, right?
Right.
But in the case where we don't talk about it, nothing gets to be true other than we're just sort of chilly and remote. And I recognize that you're feeling something, you're not talking about it, but I'm in my shit if I'm you. And I don't really have space for it right now, because if you talk about it, be a big boy. But so that's kind of, I think, what ends up happening. And so if we could just say it out loud and say, listen, I know you're going through a lot right now. And I have to be honest with you, there's a little part of me, there's a younger part of me in here that feels a little abandoned, feels like you're picking. I know you're not, but there's a part of me that feels like the horses are a little more important to me. That you could say, it's not the horses. It's this is where I'm going to regulate and do this work. And I need to be able to do this work so I can come back to this relationship and be a better version of myself. Oh yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
And so
I probably didn't have those words for it at the time. I just knew something was happening for me, that I needed to be there. And I was putting a lot of time and energy into there. I feel like once we talked about it, was it better?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's like you bring that shadowy stuff into the light. You have a conversation. Sometimes it doesn't come out pretty, but once you do, it was like, oh, like, it felt regulated and better.
So when couples have a conversation like that, and they're able to speak not through their experience of their wounding or through their experience of their protection, but about it, right? Like, there's a part of me in here that feels this way, right? That's about it, not through it. Invariably, when I get couples talking like that, even a little bit, they will say the same thing. They'll say, I've never heard you say that before. And you see the partner go, oh God, I've literally said that 1,000 times. And they're like, I've never heard you say that this way. And so what we have is, this speaks to the idea of the filter or the lens, right? The part of self being the filter and the lens, right? Suddenly I'm able to hear this thing that you've said 1,000 times in a different way. It's literally like I have a different filter on, or a different set of ears on me. I'm in my adult self, so I can hear that, not from a protective side, like I have to go, oh, well, what about me? I can hear that there's love in there for yourself and for me. And so when folks are having these individuation periods, or things where you have to go into some version of silence and get to know yourself a little bit better and do your personal work, it doesn't have to feel like an abandonment, because we're talking about it. Problem is no one knows how to talk about it.
Right. Well, they don't know they're triggered, and they don't know how to talk about it. And this is the thing, I'm constantly surprised at how little people talk. And I know we said this earlier, but how little people talk. And if we were just naming, like, this is hard for me, hear me out, I'm struggling.
Well, something you're really good at saying, you always say, you say this a lot, you're like, I just need to say this out loud. Right? Which means I mean some of this, but maybe not all of it. I don't necessarily need you to speak to it, though you probably will. I don't need you to fix it. I just need to put this out on the table and get my eyes on it and get your eyes on it. And it's always so helpful when you do that, because it does absolve me from my very mammalian place of needing to fix everything. And you're saying to me, I don't need you to fix this. I just need to say this out loud. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's hear it. And so I'm able to take a breath and give you some room on that.
Something else I'd like to cover on this topic is, and I saw this recently. So when you have a level of intimacy, closeness, and safety with a partner, so I'm just saying, so you're in this beautiful thing all of a sudden, like you're in this beautiful relationship. I'm kind of taking a right turn, but not so much. So you've met this person. It's maybe been 6 months, a year. This is a really good relationship. Maybe for the first time in your life, you feel safe. Like, you feel loved, like you feel like you matter, like this is great. And then you recognize you like want to go spend some time alone. You want to individuate. And so y'all have a night, like you've spent maybe 4 or 5 nights together, and then you go have a night alone. I want to talk about how triggering the quiet can be for people who grew up in households where they felt alone, where they were abandoned. And just speak to that how, because I think sometimes we're in this closeness and we're in this co-regulation and we're together, and then we each go to our own houses and it's silent. Right? And I
Yeah,
recently had someone talk about this, and what they found is they were like checking out. They were like soothing themselves, but not in ways they wanted to soothe themselves. And what
sure,
we
sure,
talked
sure.
about
Yeah.
is
Hmm.
don't underestimate how triggering that separation can be, not because you can't be alone, but because what you've been in is so good, and being alone for you previously to this was like a survival
Hmm.
mechanism, or maybe as a child it was really triggering. So talking to your body, hey, we're going to have some separation, we're going to go into our own space, we're going to be in our own energy. How can I care for myself if my nervous system is like shocked by the silence? Does that make sense to you?
It does, and I imagine you're saying this can be true for either party, either the person who is saying, "Hey, I need a little space," or the person who
Either, like
feels.
even the ones that want space,
Mhm, mhm,
all of a sudden they go home to their own house and it's
mhm,
silent.
mhm,
And that silence can be dysregulating. They can have
mhm,
forgotten, I don't remember what it's like to be in my own energy. I don't remember what I do. This may sound weird, but it happens. It's like all of a sudden they're checking out, or they start drinking, or they're numbing out, or they're, instead of like they were going to have alone time because they wanted to like come back to themselves in a different
mhm.
way, to
Right.
like maybe explore their hobbies or their pastimes or whatever. But because all of a sudden they're alone, it's like shocking to their nervous system.
Well, right, and then if some of those inner voices start talking, some of that wounding starts coming up. It's like point me to the any port in a storm, and yeah, to your point,
Yeah.
I can't really deal with the silence, even though silence is probably what I need the most.
What they wanted, what they were looking forward to. Like a lot, this person had plans
Mm-hmm.
to, they were going to do things, go for a walk, enjoy these things, and like just were really excited. And then got into the silence, and it was like a trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to speak to that, because when we're with people and then all of a sudden we're without, we're in this intimate, safe, loving scenario, and all of a sudden we're by ourselves. Some people might need to just tell their body, like, hey, we're going to go spend time with ourselves. They might need to talk to the inner children within them who maybe were lonely as kids, who silence feels good, but maybe it's a little shocking to them. Like, how can we regulate ourselves more intentionally once we get to our own space, in our own energy, in the quiet? Because I don't think people think about having this conversation. I think they're like, I just checked out and I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, and then that time's gone, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't do any of the things I thought I was going to do. I didn't connect in the ways that I was hoping that I would. I didn't write in my journal. And you look, and maybe you need that. Maybe you need to watch just a you know Netflix by yourself and sit. Um, but I find that one of the things that folks have a really hard time doing is talking to themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the way that you're sort of outlining, which is to prepare the the landscape of inner selves for something like that, right? And it's sort of antithetical. It's like, well, who am I talking to? I'm like, you're talking to yourself. What, am
Yeah.
I crazy? You're talking to the parts of you. And so I will coach people and say, listen, I don't care. Maybe you're driving in the car and you put the kids in the back seat, the inner kids in the back seat. Maybe you do it in the shower. If you live in New York City, as an example, you can walk down the street and talk to yourself all you want. No one's going to think you're crazy. But creating a conversation and a communication with those aspects of self, it titrates the nervous system
Yes.
and prepares you for a conversation that you're going to have that may be difficult. And
Mm-hmm.
also, there's Mabel, um, perhaps what you said, that silence can be deafening.
Right. And I agree with you. Like, learning to talk to yourself is so important. Like, I'm walking myself through all kinds of things. Like, talking to that inner child.
Well,
Oh,
right, but you're really adept at that, right? You've been doing that for a long time. I find that it's news to clients, even clients who I've been working with for some time. They're like, "Wait, so how do you do that?" I'm like, "How have we not covered this?" I feel
right.
like I've done them a disservice not teaching them how to speak to how to speak to themselves.
Well, what I found is like people, if like, let's say they end up getting triggered and they're checking out, they judge themselves. They think either, I don't know how to be alone anymore. Am I codependent? Or I can't believe I just checked out on social media. And what
Mm-hmm.
you can change is a compassionate conversation with, oh, wow, I was regulating myself. And do I want to regulate myself through going through social media? Or do I
Mm-hmm.
want to regulate myself by going for a walk? And then it becomes more conscious. Do whatever
Mm-hmm.
you want.
Mm-hmm.
And if you end up regulating yourself in a way that doesn't feel so great, it's not about judgment. It's not, you're not wrong. You're just doing something to kind of try to reset your nervous system. It feels easier to enter that space than just the abrupt energetic shift.
Do we need to cover codependence versus interdependence?
If you want that, I'll leave that up to you. That's psycho talk to you. So go for it.
Well, well, it feels like everybody's got psychotalk now, right? They have psychobabble, and you always talk about the fact that people are coming up with all their new words, right? Like, what was it? What are some of the colloquial?
I don't know. I just feel like we've come up with so many new words and modalities and theories that I feel like we're confusing people. But codependence and interdependence is something that's talked about a lot.
Well, do you think we're codependent or interdependent?
I probably couldn't even tell you what the true definition of interdependent is. I just
see. I think we're interdependent, but I don't necessarily think that being a little codependent every so often is so bad.
I think everybody's a bit codependent. I found I'm less codependent with you and more codependent with like strangers. So that's a whole nother conversation.
That's right. But I feel like people in relationships who are trying not to be codependent tend to have like this armor towards vulnerability. And maybe that's a bias that I have, but
no, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, when we talk about compromise, I think people get confused. Like, what is compromise in a relationship?
Well, I always ask the question, what would love do? And often that answer probably could be couched as being codependent in some fashion.
Well, if you start with love of self first, and you check in, like I think what would love do? You start with self-love first. What would love do in this moment? Would love compromise because it loves the space between you and your partner. It loves the thing that you're building together. Is it self-betrayal? Is it really like taking anything from you? Or is it nurturing? Yeah. I mean, that's where you have to ask the question. Is does self-love say, I'm not compromising here? I think that answer is really clear if we're paying attention, if we're doing it for the right reasons. With mindful reasons.
So I've seen this type of situation a few times where people are in the throes of a relationship that maybe it's been going on for a year or 2 years. They're deep into it, let's say. And then a job, school, something calls them to make like a big move. I have a client right now who's kind of dealing with something like this is popping on the horizon. And this is sort of asking him to move with this partner who he's been with for a while. I think he's definitely in love with. She's in love with him. And, there's no good move. Like there's nothing in this move for him other than to be with her. And so I said to him, this is not an answer that I can give you, but you have to ask yourself the question for yourself. What would love do? Like what would it, and to your point, like perhaps the loving response for him is, I have to take care of myself. I have to do my thing here. But I like to think if something were to call you to a particular place, that I would find it within myself to, that love would say, well, obviously we support you in this thing that you need to do. Like horses as an example.
Well, I mean, the dream of we're in Costa Rica now, yay! But for years, like if it had just been me, I would have been here 8 years ago, right? But we have kids, I have you. There came a point where I said to myself, you and my family, I mean, I wasn't going to leave, but you know what I'm saying? Like, y'all are more important. What I'm building with you was more important than me spending time here. Was this a dream? And I hoped you and I would get here and we talked about someday getting here. Yes. But I'd rather nurture the family I have with y'all than leave that all behind. I mean, I want you to know I never thought I was going to leave it all behind, but there was, you have this dream. Like all of a sudden I'm like, wait, this sounds awful. My point being is I had a dream of a life where the kids were not ready. You were not ready. And I was like, that's fine. So I made the life where I was. I didn't feel like I was sacrificing anything because what was so precious and important to me was right in front of me. Did I have this thing that maybe someday? Yeah. But I was like willing to let that go in order to nurture what we created. You know what I mean?
Okay. So I feel like we're getting far afoot from our initial question and we're getting towards time. Yeah. No, and I'm like, what are the show notes? What are the show notes going to be on this one?
I don't know. I don't know. We've talked about Yeah, we've talked about it all.
We've talked about codependence, interdependence. We've talked about individuation, and either the person they couched that question very, very well, and I won't recall exactly what it was, but I think we hit it. I think we hit it.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, for myself and for Ash. Again, thanks for joining us. We will again try to become more consistent with our podcasting.
We always say that, like we're moving at our own pace, and
we are moving at our own pace.
It's like we're in our own world.
We are
in our own world. I will say, I do have a newsletter. If you want to hear some of my soul musings, that's what it's called. Please go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. I really love doing it. It makes me very happy.
I can tell you guys, it's really good. She reads them to me before she sends them out, and they're just awesome. So check them out.
Yeah, I'm hoping to build some community through there. And also, if you're interested in exploring some of my favorite topics, soul and spirituality, please check out the Blue Butterfly Effect podcast, where I talk with my beautiful friends, Patsy Kenny and Mildred Murillo.
Well, let's talk about the fact that we got a new member of the Blue Butterflies.
We do have a new member of the Blue Butterflies.
That's exciting.
We have Patsy. Patsy. So it's 3 soul friends chatting about our favorite topics: transformation, spirituality, and grounding it in a way that's accessible.
I'm so jealous. I want to be a blue butterfly. Does that make me codependent?
No. Oh my God, you keep asking that question.
You guys are going to get jackets soon, right? The blue butterflies?
Actually, someone just asked. Someone asked if we had swag.
You need it.
Like the pink ladies from Blue Butterfly.
Yeah, the pink ladies. Yeah.
And what do you got going on?
So as always, we have the Practice of Love. The book can be found wherever books are found. And that also includes audio on Kindle, blah, blah, blah. And also I've been doing some longer form YouTube, but I'm going to be doing more of it. So just dabbling in, not too long, because, no one needs to hear me talk that long. But really, pushing my trying to be a little more active on social media, just sort of sharing a little bit more. I had my the Unfinished Man podcast with John Kim. We have 5 episodes up, and that's going to be on my channel, as well as the angrytherapist.com. So all of that. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you again when we talk to you again.
Yes, no promises. Sorry, we can't be trusted. Love to you all.